In the shadows between history's pages, there are stories locked away in vaults colder than stone, secrets written in the blood of wars no one was meant to survive. They whisper through torn files, coded maps, and the silences of those who vanished without trace. Every fragment unearthed pulls us closer to a truth so corrosive, it was buried beneath decades of lies, and guarded by those who still fear it will rise again. On the morning of September 17, 1946, engineers from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers were dispatched to an abandoned railway tunnel outside Berchtesgaden, Bavaria. The tunnel, partially collapsed from explosive charges set during the last days of the war, had been marked as a minor hazard in occupation zone records. Local accounts suggested that the site had been used by retreating German forces to store material, but no official search had yet been carried out. At 11:42 hours, a section of rubble gave way under excavation, revealing the crushed nose of a narrow-gauge locomotive. The locomotive bore faded Reichsbahn markings, but what caught the attention of the senior engineer, Captain Harold Whitman, was the presence of 3 welded freight cars behind it. No external markings, each secured with heavy riveted doors. Cutting torches revealed only one accessible compartment. Inside, covered in layers of dust and ash, stood a waist-high steel container, its corners reinforced with thick welded plates. The weight was such that it required a winch and flatbed transport. The crate was marked in stenciled Gothic script, Projekt Morgenröte. Beneath it, a red stamp, Nur für A9 Freigabe, 12/4/45. The A9 designation was later matched to a Luftwaffe Special Projects division based in Recklinlars, primarily responsible for advanced jet aircraft prototypes and experimental ordnance. The date on the stamp was troubling. It fell 5 days after Germany's unconditional surrender. The container was moved to a temporary U.S. military warehouse in Munich for cataloging. A team from the 970th Counterintelligence Corps was summoned, and the crate was opened under guarded conditions. Inside were 4 cylindrical canisters, each containing tightly wound 35mm film reels. The labels were written in a hurried hand, some in shorthand known to Luftwaffe test engineers, others in technical notation. The real leader of the first canister bore the title, Versuchsbestätigung, X-12, Bodensee Proving Grounds. Eyewitness notes from Sergeant Edwin Cooley, present during the first private screening, describe blurred imagery of a twin-engine jet aircraft, identified later as a modified Arado AR-234, taking off from a flat, makeshift strip along a lakeshore. The aircraft carried a bulbous undercarriage pod. In subsequent frames, the pod detached at altitude and fell toward a floating target raft, detonating in a vertical plume. Cooley noted that the blast column appeared too narrow for conventional explosives and that nearby water immediately boiled, sending steam clouds hundreds of meters high. Over the next 2 days, 3 more reels were screened. One depicted nocturnal loadouts under floodlights, Luftwaffe ground crews wearing uniforms stripped of rank insignia. Another showed a briefing room, with a wall map depicting Allied bomber routes over Western Germany, annotated in red grease pencil. The final reel contained fragmented footage of an underground hangar, with racks of unmarked metal canisters under tarps. There were no soundtracks on any reel. Cross-referencing with Allied occupation logs uncovered no record of a Bodensee Proving Grounds facility. However, Swiss customs records from April 1945 show several unauthorized night crossings of the Swiss border by unidentified aircraft, radar returns logged at military stations in St. Gallen and Thegau. All intercept attempts failed. By October 1946, the container and its contents were transferred to the NATO Coordination Depot in Liège, Belgium, under a sealed directive co-signed by U.S. Army Major General Leslie Groves, formerly of the Manhattan Project. No public acknowledgement of the films or their origin was ever made. In early 1947, the Munich warehouse where the crate had been stored was gutted by fire. Official reports cite faulty wiring. The night watchman told CIC investigators he smelled burning fuel oil minutes before the alarm sounded. The surviving film reels were stored in Liège for an unknown period before their documented trail ends abruptly in 1952. An internal NATO memo from that year, declassified only in part, lists Projekt Morgenröte among items of strategic implication, slated for Level 6 clearance review. No outcome of that review survives in the accessible archive. Personnel connected to the discovery met unusual fates in subsequent years. Captain Whitman was killed in an automobile collision outside Frankfurt in 1948, the other driver never identified. Sergeant Cooley was reassigned to the Korean theater in 1950. His service record ends with a missing in action entry during a routine transport flight over the Yellow Sea. Lieutenant Alan Voss, who handled the initial German translation of the labels, resigned from the Army in 1947 and later disappeared during a hiking trip in the Black Forest. In 1969, a retired Bundeswehr colonel, speaking under condition of anonymity to a West German journalist, claimed to have witnessed a late-war Luftwaffe experiment involving a blast device tested on Lake Constance that left dead fish as far as the shore in Switzerland. His account matched in broad detail the content of the first reel. The journalist's notes were confiscated during a police search in 1970, officially as part of an unrelated espionage investigation. No further photographic evidence of Projekt Morgenröte has surfaced in the public domain. Requests to NATO archives for any material related to the films return a standardized reply: no responsive records exist. The designation X-12 appears nowhere else in surviving Luftwaffe ordnance documentation, nor in Allied intelligence summaries of captured German weapons programs. Some researchers suggest it may have been a designation created solely for internal masking purposes, a placeholder for a project never meant to appear on formal rosters. Today, the collapsed tunnel near Berchtesgaden is overgrown, its entrance sealed with reinforced concrete under Bavarian state authority. Access is prohibited without express federal clearance. The original railway line has been dismantled. The nearest station's platform serves now as a pedestrian path for hikers. In local folklore, the tunnel is known as the Hollenmund, the mouth of hell, an ironic echo of its more tangible role as a hiding place for one of the most enigmatic fragments of late-war German military history. The unanswered questions remain as fixed as the reinforced doors of the lost freight cars. What was the X-12? Why did testing continue after the surrender? And who, in the waning days of the Reich, believed it was worth sealing behind steel and stone, beyond the reach of both victors and the defeated? On July 4, 1952, a Royal Air Force listening station in RAF Cheadle, Staffordshire, intercepted an unusual burst of high-frequency radio traffic. The signal originated from somewhere over the Baltic Sea and was partially masked by routine Soviet naval communications. The encryption style was atypical for the Red Fleet, short, staccato bursts, repeating at irregular intervals. Cryptographic analysis at GCHQ identified the cipher as a variant of the Fialka system, but with anomalies in the key structure suggesting non-standard origin. Within 48 hours, MI6's Section Y had linked the source of the transmissions to a remote Estonian island, Vormsi, then under strict Soviet military control. The site, according to outdated pre-war maps, contained a small meteorological outpost built in 1938 by the Estonian Ministry of Aviation. Reconnaissance photographs taken by RAF PR Canberra flights in the preceding months showed only a scatter of wooden structures, a radio mast, and a pier. There was no visible military garrison. The operation to investigate was codenamed Glass Veil. On August 22, 1952, a three-man MI6 field team, traveling under diplomatic cover via Helsinki, crossed into the Baltic aboard a fishing trawler operated by a Finnish asset. They landed under darkness, guided by a dim shoreline lantern left intentionally unshuttered. The first contact with the weather station came at 2:13 hours. What they found disturbed even seasoned field operatives. The door to the main building was ajar. A table in the center of the mess hall was set with 4 plates, bowls half filled with barley soup, spoons resting mid-motion, as if the diners had stood up mid-meal. The chairs had not been pushed back. In the adjoining radio room, the primary transmitter was still humming, its tubes glowing faintly. A continuous loop of a short, 7-second tone played at half volume over the speaker. The equipment was operational but tuned to no known Soviet naval frequency. Pinned to the wall above the radio desk was a map of the Baltic region, but with ink lines stretching far beyond local waters, arcs extending into the North Atlantic, some terminating at coordinates known to correspond with NATO convoy lanes. Small red pins marked positions along these arcs. One pin, placed far from any known route, corresponded to a mid-ocean meeting point used only by Royal Navy nuclear transport vessels. In a locked drawer, the team recovered a logbook written in Cyrillic. The entries abruptly stopped on August 12, 1952. The last note recorded in neat handwriting, asterisk, asterisk, objective completed, awaiting instructions. A second, smaller notebook written in German was found in the same desk. Its contents were fragmentary, shipping dates from 1944, names of Kriegsmarine officers, and the notation U-415 Übergabe, Riga, transfer. The U-415 was a German submarine lost in the Bay of Biscay in August 1944, but no record exists of a Riga transfer. The island's pier showed signs of recent use, fresh mooring ropes, fuel stains, and cigarette butts of Soviet manufacture. Yet no boats were visible, and no crew or garrison was encountered. A search of surrounding outbuildings turned up a weather balloon frame and several crates of radios marked with pre-war German manufacturer codes. Each crate bore an additional stencil in Cyrillic, military communications. The team departed before dawn, leaving the site exactly as found. 3 days later, a Soviet naval patrol was photographed by Swedish Air Force reconnaissance aircraft off the coast of Waldsee. The weather station buildings were subsequently razed, leaving only foundations. When MI6 attempted to retrieve the notebooks from their Helsinki safehouse, the lockbox had been forced open and the contents removed without signs of forced entry. Declassified Ministry of Defense memos from the period suggest the site may have been part of a covert post-war program integrating remnants of German naval intelligence assets into Soviet service. The dual-language documents hinted at an operation to monitor Western naval nuclear convoys long before the public was aware such convoys existed. No official acknowledgement of Glass Veil was made, and the files remain redacted in critical sections. Years later, in 1978, a retired British naval signals officer testified anonymously to a BBC producer that one of the frequencies intercepted from Waldsee matched a wartime Enigma variant known to have been used by the Abwehr for long-range maritime reporting. If true, it would suggest the equipment, and possibly the operators, had direct continuity from the Axis intelligence apparatus into the Soviet era. Today, Waldsee's surviving residents recall the weather station only as the Forbidden Compound, a place where uniformed strangers arrived in silence and left without goodbyes. In winter, the sea ice is said to groan at night in a pattern of clicks and pulses, sounds the old fishermen half-jokingly call the ghosts still sending their reports. In the final days of April 1945, Königsberg was a city under siege. Soviet artillery pounded its fortifications while German military convoys scrambled to evacuate critical personnel and material before the encirclement closed. Among the chaotic exodus, a convoy of 6 armored trucks departed the city under heavy chemical smokescreen cover. Soviet field reports from the Second Belarusian Front describe glimpses of the column through breaks in the haze, vehicles bearing the markings of the 11th SS Volunteer Panzergrenadier Division Nordland, yet stripped of unit insignia and traveling without escort. The convoy's cargo was not recorded in Wehrmacht supply manifests. However, a Soviet intelligence summary dated May 2, 1945 refers to intercepted radio traffic from Königsberg mentioning R.E-1000 and Vorringstoff Blau, priority level blue. No known German weapons project or logistics code matched R.E-1000. Within 48 hours, Königsberg fell to Soviet forces, and the convoy's trail disappeared. The mystery resurfaced decades later in the summer of 1983, when a team of Polish reservoir divers conducting routine maintenance on the Włocławek Dam made a startling discovery. Resting in silt 22 meters below the surface was the rusted shell of an armored truck, its design consistent with late-war German heavy transport models, including distinctive bulletproof radiator grills. The cargo bay was sealed by corroded steel plating. When finally breached, the compartment was empty, save for lead-lined wall compartments and a Soviet-manufactured DP-3 radiometer, its dial frozen in the maximum reading position. The discovery was immediately reported to Polish military authorities, who classified the find and ordered the site sealed. Within days, a NATO forensic liaison, ostensibly in Poland to discuss Cold War arms control, was photographed near the reservoir. Archival records obtained after the fall of the Eastern Bloc confirm that the truck was quietly transported to a secure military depot in Torunia before being moved west under unknown custody. Its current location is unrecorded. No surviving German documents reference the convoy's route or intended destination. Allied intelligence reports from 1946 to 1947 contain scattered mentions of blue priority Königsberg shipments, believed to have been bound for either the Harz Mountains or the Sudetenland, regions known for housing underground weapons facilities. Interviews with former Red Army soldiers stationed along the Vistula that spring describe receiving unusual orders to patrol river crossings at night and to halt all river traffic without explanation. One sergeant, speaking to Polish state television in 1992, recalled seeing 3 or 4 trucks covered in reeds, being ferried across by men who spoke no Russian but wore Soviet tunics. The R.E-1000 designation has generated decades of speculation among military historians. Some propose it was an experimental fuel cell power unit developed for long-range U-boats. Others suspect it denoted a late-war radiation-based weapon or propulsion system, explaining the lead-lined compartments and the radiometer found decades later. A less sensational theory suggests it was an industrial component intended for a secret energy project in the Reich's final months. An obscure entry in the 1945 diary of Drive Hans Kruger, an engineer formerly stationed at Piemont, notes R-1000 trial shipment relocated from Baltic corridor to inland site, per M. The initial M has been linked to General Hans Kammler, the SS officer in charge of numerous advanced weapons programs, who vanished in May 1945 under circumstances that remain disputed. The Włocławek Dam truck discovery was never publicly acknowledged by the Polish government, yet local rumors persist. Fishermen tell of divers who refused to return to the site after experiencing unexplained nausea and headaches. Archival photos from the recovery operation, leaked in the 1990s, show men in improvised lead aprons hauling crates to shore, though these crates do not appear in official inventories. As with many late-war disappearances, the true fate of the Königsberg convoy lies buried in a nexus of destroyed records, deliberate obfuscation, and Cold War opportunism. 6 trucks set out under smokescreen cover, carrying a cargo important enough to merit its own coded designation. Only one has been found, stripped of everything but the clues that deepen its mystery. Traces of radiation, foreign instruments, and the unyielding silence of those who knew what R-1000 really meant. On February 9, 1947, the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations received a nondescript brown envelope at Bolling Field Headquarters in Washington, D.C. There was no return address, only a blurred Berlin postmark. Inside were 3 tightly wound rolls of 35mm microfilm, each individually sealed in wax paper. Scrawled on the outer wrapping of the first roll in block capitals, in both German and Japanese, was the phrase, Projekt Seeschlange, version 1.3 Technische Specification. The films were forwarded to a secure darkroom at Wright Field, Ohio, for examination. Developed images revealed engineering diagrams for a weapon designated Seeschlange, a submarine-launched, transoceanic ballistic missile. The blueprints bore Reich-Sadler watermarks alongside Imperial Japanese Navy approval seals dated June 1945. Margin annotations in Japanese katakana identified modifications to the missile's propellant chamber and guidance systems, suggesting input from engineers attached to the Kure naval arsenal. The most alarming element was a trajectory chart showing a launch position 1,800 kilometers east of Japan, with a target ellipse covering the U.S. West Coast from San Diego to Seattle. Estimated time to impact, 42 minutes. A handwritten note in German beneath the chart read, Erprobung Erfolgreich, August 7, 1945. This was 2 days after the Hiroshima bombing. A search of U.S. Navy Pacific Theater logs revealed no recorded missile impacts or interceptions in that time frame. However, a classified 1945 report from the submarine USS Finback, SS-230, described radar contact with anomalous high-altitude object moving rapidly eastward from a point near the Kuril Islands, disappearing from detection over the Central Pacific. The microfilm's second roll contained photographs of a modified Japanese I-400 class submarine, its hangar deck converted to accommodate a cylindrical launch tube. Notations in German referred to Type 11B modifications, an unbuilt Kriegsmarine concept for missile-carrying U-boats. Several images depicted nighttime loading operations, with workers wearing mixed uniforms, some with the sleeve insignia of the Kriegsmarine's 30th U-boat flotilla, others in Imperial Japanese naval attire. The third roll was more fragmentary. Portions of an operations log referencing Erprobungspunkt Manchuria, Test Point Manchuria, followed by coded mission orders for Boot N-7 Seeschlange to rendezvous with Kantai Unit 8 off the coast of Sakhalin on August 3, 1945. The final frame depicted a hand-drawn map of the mid-Pacific, marked with 2 red X's. One was at the launch coordinates, the other at a position west of Hawaii. Naval historians consulted decades later noted the absence of any I-400 class submarine matching the vessel's depicted modifications in post-war Allied inventories. The Japanese surrender records list 2 of the class scuttled in 1946 by the U.S. Navy during Operation Road's End, but no corresponding hull numbers match the microfilm's annotations. The microfilm package was officially logged under Air Technical Intelligence Command Case File 6-947-S, then classified top secret and restricted to Level Omega clearance. Access was so limited that only 4 signatures appear in the custody log between 1947 and 1952. In the summer of 1952, the case file was transferred to NATO's standing group in Brussels under the rationale of strategic relevance to Atlantic defense. The package's trail ends there. Speculation among declassified Cold War analysis notes suggests 2 possibilities. Either the Seeschlange test failed mid-flight and was covered up to avoid panic, or the weapon succeeded in reaching near coastal waters but impacted harmlessly, its origin untraceable. A more unsettling theory is that the missile never carried an explosive payload at all, its purpose being a proof-of-concept flight to demonstrate feasibility to an intended recipient. In 1974, a retired CIA maritime analyst privately told a Senate investigator that the Seeschlange plans bore engineering fingerprints identical to those seen in early Soviet SLBM designs, notably the R-11FM. The analyst implied that both the plans and possibly surviving personnel from the project had been transferred to Soviet custody in the chaotic months after Japan's surrender. Today, the fate of Boot N-7 Seeschlange remains undocumented, as does the truth of whether an Axis submarine fired a ballistic missile toward the continental United States in August 1945. No official record admits to its existence, and no surviving crew have ever been identified. The 3 microfilm rolls remain unaccounted for, presumed locked away, or destroyed, in a vault whose location is known only to a handful of long-dead men. In March 1961, a Czech chemical engineer named Viktor Janacek defected to the west through the Austrian border near Gmund. Hidden among his personal effects was a battered leather notebook, water-damaged and wrapped in oilcloth. Janacek claimed it had been taken from a Gestapo safe in Prague in May 1945 by his uncle, a partisan fighter. The notebook was handed directly to CIA officers in Vienna and immediately flown to West Berlin for evaluation. The contents were chilling in their precision. Dozens of names filled its pages, scientists, engineers, and technicians, each entry annotated with their specialty, previous wartime assignment, and a relocation date between April and May 1945. In the right margin of nearly every name was stamped the word verlegt, relocated, and, in place of a destination, a single recurring code word, Waldsee. Cross-checking revealed that many of the names matched individuals involved in the Reich's uranium enrichment and high-energy physics programs. Several had last been documented working at facilities in Oranienburg and Hagerloch, both targeted by Allied bombing raids in early 1945. Others were tied to SS research units operating under the Ahnenerbe umbrella. Strikingly, not one of these individuals appeared in post-war Allied prisoner rolls or denazification records. One page, dated April 20, 1945, listed 14 physicists under Special Handling, Kammler. The Kammler notation was almost certainly a reference to SS General Hans Kammler, who oversaw numerous advanced weapons projects and disappeared in May 1945. At the bottom of that page, in a different handwriting, was a crude map of southern Germany marked with a single black X deep inside the Bavarian forest. In 1963, the CIA tasked the U.S. Army Map Service with overlaying the sketch against topographic surveys. The coordinates corresponded to a forested valley southeast of Bayerisch Eisenstein, within 15 kilometers of the Czechoslovak border. Aerial reconnaissance flights revealed irregular ground contours suggestive of buried structures, as well as a narrow service road terminating in a concrete barrier. Attempts to approach the site under the cover of forestry surveys were met with unexpected resistance. Local West German police, citing military danger zones, denied access without Bundeswehr authorization. In 1964, a joint CIA-BND operation attempted night insertion of a two-man reconnaissance team. Radio contact was lost within 40 minutes of entry into the designated grid. Both men reappeared at a Bavarian police post the following morning, disoriented and unable to account for the missing hours. Medical exams noted acute nausea, disorientation, and elevated white blood cell counts, symptoms consistent with low-level radiation exposure. Over the following decade, satellite imagery captured multiple changes at the site. Newly graded access paths, the sudden appearance and disappearance of prefabricated structures, and seasonal ground discoloration suggesting subsurface heating. Yet no above-ground facilities of significant size were ever documented. The most compelling post-war lead came in 1978, when a former Soviet GRU officer defected in Vienna. In debriefings, he claimed knowledge of a forest city installation in southern Germany jointly monitored by Soviet and East German intelligence during the 1950s. According to his account, the site was a sealed underground complex originally built in late 1944 to house uranium-related technical work evacuated from bombed cities. The scientists, he alleged, were moved in small convoys disguised as Red Cross relief transports. When pressed, he stated that most did not survive past 1947, though whether from disease, accident, or deliberate action was left ambiguous. Modern satellite surveys of the Bavarian forest continue to show the area under restricted access, patrolled intermittently by unmarked vehicles. In 1991, an amateur hiking group reported stumbling upon a camouflaged chain-link perimeter fence, beyond which they observed a set of rusting steel air vents protruding from the ground. Within weeks, the path they used was regraded and blocked by felled trees. The Waldsee ledger remains locked in a CIA archival box marked "Do Not Microfilm." Its original leather covers brittle from age. Every official request for declassification has been denied on grounds of foreign government sensitivity. None of the scientists listed have been confirmed alive or deceased. Their absence from all known post-war records suggests deliberate erasure. Whether Waldsee was a final refuge for a dying regime's most dangerous knowledge, or a tomb built to ensure that knowledge could never resurface, is unknown. What is certain is that somewhere in the dense green shadows of the Bavarian forest, a set of sealed doors still guards the answers. The files are incomplete, the voices erased, but the scars remain, in landscapes altered by hands long dead, and in the quiet corridors where classified history is kept breathing. We may never see the full picture, but the shadows left behind are enough to know the cost. Some doors were sealed for a reason, and once opened, they do not close without taking something from you.